there are top pros who I've seen what they run for their clients, and it's just egregious. Like it's completely deplorable to have, amateur competitors at doses that like by anyone's definition are very abusive. For someone that I'm just like, like I know this athlete, like I know they're not tracking those data points. I know they're not paying as close attention to this individual as they probably should. And I commend you, definitely on knowing like your limits and what you're comfortable working with, specifically with clients and assistants. I do think, very similarly, more often than not, I am trying to recommend the client to not go down that path unless they're very clear on, what they're willing to do and they have a very firm understanding on the risk profile. But it is a shame, within like our coaching scope is like, okay, well, to have someone begin to work assistance into their programming, even as like basal therapy, even like in the sense of HRT, it's like, well, you still need a baseline understanding of endocrinology, like, just fundamentally to say that like, hey, this is even remotely in the realm of indicated. But I do agree. I think a lot of girls, they come to me, they think like I'm just going to tell them to take how much Anavar for this long and like keep an eye on them. And same thing with TRT. Like, I mean, like it's very common now for girls to work with me for 12 weeks and be like, I thought we were going to start HRT. And it's like, who told you that? Like, who gave you that impression? Like, your labs are fine. Also, like, you didn't really commit to this phase to begin with. So I'm not motivated to throw in any kind of assistance at this point because, frankly, I don't think you have what it takes to really capitalize on it. And I don't think you're going to be around long enough for me to actually see this out. And I would say that's probably like the bigger challenge I have is when individuals they want to, like stop into coaching and like, get a drug protocol and then kind of run off and be like, yeah, I just wanted to see like what this was going to be like. And I think like holding really firmly and like you don't need this. Like what you need to do is focus on levers that have nothing to do with pharmacology or, in this case, PEDs.
100%. And the thing is, there are so many variables that are going to give you so much progress. Like, I work with the majority of natural athletes. I probably have one or two assisted, like, honestly. And the progress I see from my clients is exceptional. I'm not just saying this from a like, come to me like vibe. It is literally because we manage sleep. We track sleep, sorry. We manage their cycle. We manage their training volume. We actually look at the way they're executing movements. All of these things come before that. And I wish I knew that. So I turned pro naturally in 2019. And I went with another coach, someone from Brazil. And what they were asking me to use, when I never even used assistance before, was ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. And I quizzed a lot of people about it. But it's like, looking now, back then, like that me didn't know all the stuff I know now with regards to sleep, nutrition, like eating certain whole foods and like stuff like that. And I just think like it's one of those, people are just writing it down and putting it out there, and yep, you send it off to that one, send it off to that one, send it off to that one, and it's irresponsible. And it really, really riles me up,
Yeah.
as you can probably tell.
As it does me. And this is something that like you touched on earlier that I want to come back to is even for yourself, but also for clients, like just because optimal might be a little bit higher doesn't mean we need to push for that. And I love that so much. I respect you so much for saying that too, because like I do have that conversation very regularly where someone's like, I want to use L-carnitine, I want to use insulin, I want to use GH. I have access to all these peptides, like let's throw them in. And I'm like, there seems to be like, more of this, I would say, emphasis on, well, technically, like mechanistically, could we put this in place and like would it benefit you? I mean, sure, it might, but the fact is, like, I don't want you to be running on 10 drugs. Like, I don't want as like a baseline dose of like, hey, let's just get you to stage. It's like there are things that certainly can help expedite the process, but I think this needs to be weighed against yes, the individual's like potential within the sport, and like realistically, what do they want to accomplish? What is the likelihood of that happening? But also, this is a thing that like within the coaching space is like, these are drugs that are being put in place that, some are FDA approved, some, are currently used, but at the same time, like, should you be in a position where you're not really under the supervision of a medical supervisor under prescription drugs that, in many cases can be dangerous, or in many cases are just misunderstood or not fully understood?
Yeah, I mean, even when like, you're programming and you're looking at like vitamins and stuff, I'm still like, we need to get blood work done because like you can't just, I don't know, let's give an example, have someone use like if their vitamin B's too high, that's then going to be a negative and stuff like that. So it is a funny it is a funny thing, isn't it? This online coaching. It is.
It is. I think like for listeners, like one of the bigger takeaways I hope that they've gathered from this is like, just because something like I don't know, in application, in theory, like it might make sense and it might help with fat loss, it might help you build muscle, it doesn't mean it's the right answer for you. And specifically for female athletes, I think this needs to be heavily weighted against what is normal for you, because normal could at, to a certain extent, be dysregulated, and that could be very specific to just the way you've lived your life entirely. So I think working with someone who specializes specifically in female endocrinology, I think that's going to be your best bet. And maybe that isn't a GP, maybe that's someone who looks a little closer at female athletes or female individuals who, are going through some kind of dysregulation or have some degree of dysbiosis. But I think at the end of the day, like just knowing, like, is this something that actually needs to be corrected? And if I go about correcting it, what are the potential risks or consequences of doing so if I get it wrong?
And to add to that, I think it's from like my perspective, and given the progress I've made over like the past 2 years, is having making sure that like everything is locked in. So like I'm a coach and want my coach to make sure I'm sleeping for 8 hours, make sure that I'm eating whole foods, make sure that I'm resting when I'm meant to. Like all of those little things are essentially what make the biggest progress, whether you're assisted or not. And I think that's something that should be exhausted. And I believe that if your coach isn't making you drink a certain amount of water a day, a certain amount of salt, like all these kind of small things that you may not think about, I just wonder how much detail they're really paying like to everything and your then progression. Like I could not go anywhere else now, because I can't unsee what I've learned through Meg, who is an absolutely fantastic athlete and coach. And I wouldn't be the coach I am without her. I literally, like, we all learn, we do, but I never paid as much detail to all of that kind of stuff before. Sleep, not even for myself, sleep, and that is the thing I harp on about all the time. We go to bed at like 8:30 and wake up at like 5. And like I said, nutrition, from a nutrition standpoint, like I have to mark my adherence every single day. Is it a 10? If it's not, why? What have you done? Have you had more of this? Have you had less of that? Like supplements, like everything. And I just think like if you're someone that's wanting to get to the top, and I always say, like, I'm not a genetically blessed person. Like, I never kind of was. Like, we all have to work for it. I think we all say that, don't we? We're not as genetically blessed or whatever. But I think the work ethic and the little things that you can do around that are super, super powerful. So making sure that all of these variables are in place before absolutely anything else is just essential.
I couldn't agree more. And I think individuals will get so much more out of those levers prior to using assistance, because we all know someone that uses way too much of the wrong things or maybe even the right things, and it's not reflected in their physique. It didn't help
100%.
them
I was thinking
lose.
that.
They
Yeah.
didn't make significant changes, and it's like, yeah, they were assisted the whole time. So it's like, just keep that in mind. I think for listeners, when you're auditing someone's physique, just because someone made improvements, it doesn't mean they did so naturally, but it also doesn't mean that
Yeah.
those who did make improvements did so correctly.